going downtown. Word, all alone, no one to be with steps.
Hi, this is Bella, and you are listening. W N H
L
L P 1 O G
point
.5
F
F
M
M
New Haven
New Haven
streaming
live
at
at
www.
www.
dot New Haven Independent
No, yeah,
.org.
.org.
I just want to dance.
Good morning and welcome to WNHH FM's Dateline, New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Pat Dillon and Roland Lemar make New Haven and Connecticut tick. And boy, they've done it for a long time. They are the state representatives from New Haven and Hamden in Pat's case. No, this is New Haven, in Pat's case, and New Haven and East Haven in Roland's. They're here in the WNHH studio to tell us what's up with the legislative session about to start in Hamden. That time every year where you folks are up there working hard day and night about passing laws and getting money allocated for the whole state. And here in New Haven, where half our budget approximately, right, comes from there, we wonder what you're going to let us do and what you're not going to let us do. So thanks for coming in. So now this year, 2020, you guys got to, what are you going to do for an encore? I mean, the last year, I think it's fair to say, you can correct me if I'm mistaken, that you passed a whole bunch of stuff that you've been trying to pass for years. The big marquee items were the minimum wage and paid family leave, but you had other stuff too, because you finally had a real solid majority of both houses and a governor just elected. So am I right? Is this going to be a hard year to match last year in a short session? Pat, you need to get close to the mic there. And Roland?
Yeah, no, I think it's hard in a short session, regardless of what you get done in the long session. The short session is constitutionally structured to be a budget adjustment session.
Right. We pass a 2-year budget every odd number year.
That's right.
And then even number years where you folks run for re-election, you say we're not going to spend as much time up here, so let's get in and out in 3 months. I knew, Pat, you're making a face. So is it not a conspiracy like that? It was done before you were in, so it's not your fault. But that's really not the reason it works. I always assumed you're up there for 5 months in odd number years because you're not running for re-election, and you're in and out in 3 months in even number because you want to get.
I wasn't around then, but I believe it had something to do with putting the crops in.
Really?
There are a lot of theories about the origins of that.
So we only grew crops every other year?
Well,
or we said we'll sacrifice the labor every other year. Just do the budget 2 years in one.
I said I wasn't there.
But this is interesting. You always have the best theories.
I didn't come along until like 1820.
Okay.
And then, so they had already adopted the Constitution, I think, in 1818 or
Fair
so
enough.
that disestablished.
But we
the
do change
Congregational
rules
Church.
sometimes based on moving from an agricultural economy. Though in parts of the state like Suffield, there is still an agricultural economy. But do you think it might be a good thing that you guys don't need to be this much? Or conversely, do you think that without changing the rules, folks have in fact gone on to longer years because often you missed the legislature missed the deadline for passing budgets. You have special session after special session. So are we, in fact, seeing a longer legislative year? We're just not calling it that?
It shifts the power. Having a part-time, I know that, now I've been there a while, but I remember one leader who used to try to force us into special session because that person felt that the House members had too much power, and that when we went into special session, the Senate had more power.
Why is that?
Well, theoretically, depending on how you do the negotiations, you're not going to get overwhelmed by the committee process. It depends on how you draw the rules for the special session. There's another theory that it gives the governor more power, and that's certainly something that Malloy exploited. Well,
it's like the federal level. We've gone to a strong executive. Yeah.
Pardon me?
There's another way to look at this from a big picture stepping back, which is that we had this history of saying we want a citizen legislature. We don't pay you guys any real salaries based on what you folks make otherwise, right? So a lot of people become lawyers or have other jobs where they get paid a lot and they don't have to show up all the time. So other people think it's good not to have professional legislatures. But other people say as the world's gotten more complicated and government's gotten bigger and the problems pose bigger challenges, we lose by not paying legislators to be up there all the time and to be able to have it be their main job.
I think there's merit to all this. Look, we had a legislature that only met during the odd years until the Constitution was reconstructed to allow for this second year, this off year. It was the case that Connecticut legislature only met in the first year of their biennium.
So when was the change?
I forget what year it was changed, but when it was changed, the rules were it was only for budget adjustment and as a short session.
But that's not true anymore.
It hasn't been true for a long period of time. We do so much work outside of session. I've been working on transportation policy for the better part of 3-4 days a week, full days a week for the last few months. And, before that, we'd be talking about economic development, whether it's bonding, the other special session issues can be. We're up there all the time. And it's not like constituent services stops and starts according to the schedule.
So why do it? If you're getting, $35,000 or something a year?
Less than that.
Well, the base pay is 28.
But then you get called like deputy special something or other. You'll get up to like 30 or 40.
We had a raise the year the towers went down. I think that was
the one year everyone decided not to hate politicians for 7 minutes because we got attacked.
No, I think I don't. There's no linkage. I'm just. I don't. You don't do it for the money. You do it to be useful.
Got it. So let's talk.
You certainly don't do it for the title because titles don't mean much.
Well, State Rep Pat Dillon and Roland Lemar. Let's bring it back then to where we started this conversation about the upcoming session. Roland mentioned transportation. It seems like in addition to the big question about budget adjustments, because everything runs on what we get in the budget, that transportation is the marquee issue. That the governor's been trying to push from day one tolls so to fund an overhaul of our transportation system that everyone agrees we need. When he ran for governor, he said, I'll do it only on tolls. And his opponent said, no way, you can do it on everything because everyone looks at it seriously and doesn't demagogue, says you need to put tolls on everything because 40% of the revenue comes from people outside the state and there's another way to do it. So as soon as he got in, he said, oh, I lied, but he didn't say I lied. And he said, I want tolls on everything. So that had a big uproar and you had a whole year where you couldn't pass anything. So now there's going to be a special session or something where you're back to pushing the idea of trucks only tolling. Put on new tolls, but just for trucks. And yet you now have 18 members of the Senate, I guess, caucus. The Democrats are for it, which means it could pass the Senate. But it has all sorts of problems because Rhode Island did that and there's a lawsuit. And it doesn't get you most of the money you need and all the out-of-state people. What do you guys think about this?
I would say don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Oh, so you're saying if we can get our foot in the door this way?
Yes. And I think that number 18 in the Senate, if I recall, and I think Martin Looney really deserves some kind of praise for this. It must have been very difficult.
To get 18 to agree because they have to run for re-election this year, and in swing districts, people who hate government just say they want to take money from you rather than they want to pay for something you want.
Well, because theoretically we're Democrats, but the governor and the legislature haven't been, we've had to deal with his messaging. And so we didn't, and I've had the same issue in my district. My understanding is the language that Martin used was a contingent agreement.
What does that mean?
It means that they haven't seen the bill, but they're willing to think about it. And that is a tremendous advance from where they were before.
But does that mean that he really has 18, or does that mean once you look at the specifics, the opponents who make the most noise, even if they don't represent the most people, will convince swing.
It means that
district
we don't
residents
know
that
what's
go-
going to happen until they vote. But they haven't seen a bill, and they agreed in principle to consider it, which is, I think,
Which is how legislation works. Largely, you don't write the bill and then see who's on board with it. You talk to members and see, okay, what are your concerns? What do you think the opportunities are? How would you conceive of it?
Step one: do you two both support having highway tolls? And if you do you support a trucks only or all cars, or trucks only as step one?
I've supported congestion on a statewide basis for all vehicles.
What does congestion mean?
Basing it upon the amount of traffic on the road, it changes the price point of
So
which you would
congestion pricing tolls for
pay.
everybody.
That's what I supported at a statewide basis. That was the genesis of the plan that I was running in the spring. We had actually created a series of discounts for based upon income eligibility, on Connecticut
in-state.
drivers being in state, and also based upon your level of income.
Well, if you're
weren't able
from-
to get that. We
but
weren't
if
able
you're
to get
from
that plan
Boston,
passed.
you have a low income. Would that cover it, or just
No.
okay?
It would be for Connecticut-based drivers.
And why are you for full tolls?
I was there because I thought it was the only way that we could, one, protect the general fund. People have this narrative that the
You're
state
going to
government has
raid
been
this. Yeah.
been stealing from the special transportation fund. They've been stealing the gas. It's completely false. There have been news articles highlighting like how these organizations who are saying that just get the facts wrong every time. It's the other way around. It's education, and municipalities have been bailing out roads and highways for years. And so I want to make sure, I come from here. I come from New Haven. So I want to make sure that we're not using education funds to pay for roads and highways. And instead, we're allowing what every other state on the Eastern Seaboard does, which is toll out-of-state, in-state drivers on our roadways. I didn't have the votes. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. I didn't have the votes to get that passed.
Mhm.
What we seem to have the votes for are trucks only at about 12 locations, bridges across the state, qualifying for a federal program in which we could secure federal dollars at almost zero interest rate and pay back that term by collecting those tolls at those locations. It's a much more limited program. It limits where we can invest.
Like how much does it raise versus how much your other plan would raise?
The other plan raised close to $1 billion a year, which would have allowed transformative investments in rail, buses, pedestrian, bike walk mobility, in addition to getting all of our highways to a state of good repair. This limits what we're able to do. We have to be more
How much
targeted
is
in our
this?
approach. This is about $175 million.
That's nothing compared to the other.
Yeah, well, we're only tolling trucks.
And then what can you do with that money for real?
So we're still going to have to target it. And this is where I'm focusing most of my effort right now, is how do you ensure that we're actually getting to the investments I think are transformative, which are bike ped investments, mobility investments like protected cycle tracks, and getting into buses and trains, which are the mobility option that more and more people are
Okay, I
taking.
want to get to those specifics, but first I want to ask Pat, are you for the full toll, the full Monty? That you said perfect shouldn't be the enemy of good. Do you consider the perfect, the original plan, and the good what you can get now, the
I was
175?
speaking broadly, but yes, I actually filed a bill years ago to do tolls and ended up being, and it was very underwritten. It was a concept bill, and it was a slow news year. And I think it was January
And
3rd or 4th.
I wish we can get back to some of those slow news.
Yes, I miss those days. Christine Stewart did a story, and I became the girl of the week for Chaz and AJ. And I think many men under 50 in this region, egged on by that particular show, took the time to call my home and share
Wow.
their views of me.
What they say?
They were, well, some of them weren't well when they called. They were, they were hostile. So I've already been on the record. I had a very strong feeling that as cars became more efficient, that the gas tax was going to be inadequate, and that
Mhm.
that means that the
You always have that way of looking ahead. Yeah,
What?
that was interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
and that was my argument at the time, and that was, since we very often are a drive-through state. Every state is to a certain extent, but we're a small drive-through state. You can actually tank up in New York or wherever, and you can make it through the state without refueling. And it's easier and easier to do, so that all the people that had assumed that the gas tax would pay for the repairs, I believe that had a very short shelf life at this point.
Haji Beit Shadaboshilu says, good morning, reps. Keep making New Haven proud. And the reps are state reps Pat Dillon, Roland Lemar on Dateline New Haven 103.5 FM, newhavenindependent.org. So, Pat, you had an infrastructure bill for roads. Is that tied into this with the Boulevard and Whaley?
It's more than one bill. We haven't always been on the same page in New Haven, and
right,
so,
like about red light cameras, for instance. Yeah.
Well, no, just I did a bill years ago, and I don't know if that's out yet. That to repair Forest Road, because there's one stretch where the pipe is only 10 feet wide, and the flooding goes down into the homes. City Hall was more interested in bikes at that time. They testified in support of it, but they didn't do anything. So we had a
Pat
series
never
of
forgets.
I think Pat and I have always been on the same side, except for red light cameras.
Right. I actually had my own version, though. It was the right turn on red.
So
problem.
what are your bills for Boulevard and Whaley?
The second is Upper Whaley Avenue, which, if you recall, was widened. Which means there are some spots up there where it's 5 lanes, or a very wide 4 lanes. At the corner of Dayton Street, an 11-year-old girl was killed.
Gabrielle Lee
was killed. That is a neighborhood that is not just a drive-through from Woodbridge to downtown. And I wanted some pedestrian refuges of some kind, not just. And that's the same thinking on the Boulevard. Oh, I think the Boulevard...
2 deadly stretches. The Boulevard, just people just walk there at night, get run over. It's a speedway.
Route 80, similar. Yeah, I think Route 80, Whaley, and the Boulevard are 3 roads that...
So you have separate bills for Boulevard and Whaley. What are you looking for at Boulevard?
I think we're going to have to do a study, to be honest, because...
rubber duckies didn't work. That was the big plan years ago. They put those rubber duckies delineators, orange delineators, on Boulevard. Maybe they did work a little, but it hasn't stopped the problem.
And they took them down, right? I don't think they're still there.
Well, it depends on what problem we're trying to solve, and I think that's the problem we had with some of the other discussions we've had at the Capitol and locally. If you agree on what you're solving, then I think it's easier to go. We had a subcommittee years ago about access to the park for kids in West River.
Right, and now they closed the bridge. You spend all the money building the pedestrian bridge, which I understand why they did that, but you still can't cross the road to get to the park.
Well, kids do cross the road. That's the problem.
Right, you can't go above
There's
the road
nowhere
safely.
to do it without getting
safe.
pancaked, though. Yes.
Yeah.
So there is an access issue, and there's also a speedway issue. It's bizarre. I mean, there are times that it's just, it's a racing, it's like Route 80. And the same kinds of vehicles sometimes, and so I think we need to be, I didn't want to come up, and I was sharing with some people in district last night. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a traffic planner. It's very much hands-on, dealt with this for a long time. But I think we need to look really in some kind of a holistic way at what's going on at the Boulevard. And we need to think about how to balance access from the people who live there, which is similar with Whaley Avenue, with the design of that road is dangerous. I mean, there's absolutely nothing to slow down the traffic. And so it's a stepchild. Malloy wanted to buy new railroad cars for the people in Fairfield County.
I'm going to get that in a second, because we haven't had a single, in my memory, in 40 years, so if I'm wrong, we have never seen a governor hold a press conference in New Haven about buses. We see them every 2 months about trains at Union Station.
Yep.
But Roland, what do you have about Route 80? Do you have some bill about that?
Yeah, I mean, partly the COG, the South Central Regional Council of Governments, was doing a study on, because Route 80 goes through New Haven,
a lot of places,
East Haven, North
also
Branford,
places that don't even exist. Yeah.
Right. And so trying to come up with a comprehensive plan. I think, frankly, the COG failed in coming up with that comprehensive plan, and now I'm just going to sort of take over from a New Haven, East Haven standpoint and work on sidewalks, bus stops, and street design in some of the core sections of New Haven and East Haven, because we've had traffic fatalities on both sides of the border there in New Haven, East Haven. It is a remarkably dangerous stretch of roadway where a primary access point for folks in the Quinnipiac Meadows and the Foxton neighborhoods. And the bus stops are, in many cases, located on the shoulder of a travel lane because there are no sidewalks and the bus lanes are not protected. In the winter, it becomes particularly more dangerous because, due to plowing on that road, there's no safe place for anyone to stand or walk. So sidewalks, bus shelters, bus routes, street design on Route 80. I'm going to make it a focus. And I've been chair of transportation now for a few months, and so I think I've established myself well enough in the department, and I know what I'm talking about when I reach out to DOT, and I think I can start to talk about Whaley, El Grasso Boulevard, and there are state routes throughout Connecticut that I really think
It is. You talk about the three worst places, those state roads. It's always a state. Like I walk every day, and when I go to Whaley and Blake, you know how Blake twice hits Whaley? The first time near the boulevard if you're coming from downtown. It is impossible not to put your life in danger crossing that intersection because the way the state designed the road, a block from Whaley heading west, it comes at this curve, a very dramatic curve.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone who comes down that, makes that turn is going very fast, often on their phones. And it's a very long walk because they cut out a big chunk of the corner. So if you start walking in that corner, you look back and see if any cars are coming. And if no cars are coming, you start walking. Once you're in the middle of that intersection, the cars have come so fast that many times I have come very close to being hit because they're looking at their phone or whatever. And it's the design, and the city can do nothing about that, right? Because
the city has a role. I mean,
the city can do something.
Yeah. What can they do?
I mean, one, it's working with DOT on sort of what
But they always
want.
tell us you can't work with DOT. They've been trying to get a cycle track on the west side of town for years, and they keep saying they didn't put this bit out. They have to prove a new thing at the state, and everything goes over years.
I'm not going to get in the middle of some of those fights. I think there's a lot of people to blame in many cases on many issues.
But I thought we could just blame the DOT for everything because they never care about people and
you
buses.
You can. It's not really fair all the time, though. But in these specific instances, yes, those roadways were designed to move cars without consideration for the people who lived
or places
on
of Boulevard where you cross even where it's not wide, like at Boulevard near Edgewood. There's no walk sign.
There should be.
There's not a walk sign at Boulevard.
I had a deal to do two.
I walked it this morning. I mean, there was no walk sign.
Yvette Hamilton was working on doing that. That took 10 years to do.
I mean, that's incredible.
It finally, only half of it got done because the other was set aside because of the cycle track. I assume that's the area you're talking about.
Right, yeah.
The other end, down by Chapel, was done. And congratulations to Yvette Hamilton for her persistence.
Yeah.
All right, so
we worked together on that. We wanted both.
So
the other one is on hold.
Roland, Lemar, Pat Dillon, you're on the front lines of transportation issues. You've been doing these issues for years. Pat, Roland, you're the chair of the House chair of the Transportation Committee. So one thing I've been really interested in as I listen to you folks talk today is how in New Haven we have conversations that sound so different from the conversations that take place the rest of the state. When I talk to DOT people, one guy said, we think of you guys as the tinfoil hats. Like when I say, you spent years putting an app on the buses and they still don't work. They go, we better make that work because you're a tinfoil hats and you'll see how to work them, that kind of thing.
That's right.
And we look at transportation so differently. So here, since I brought this up at the beginning of the show, you folks have talked about pedestrian safety, buses, and trains.
Right.
Nobody talks about that. This is all about highways, isn't it?
Well, it's kind of... Have you ever been to the building of DOT? It looks like the Starship Enterprise. You can't... Now, maybe they've changed this since I've been there, but you can't approach it by on foot or by mass transit. It's sort of out there, and you drive into the
Rocky
building
Hill?
down below. Yeah.
It is Rocky Hill. I mean, this has been...
That doesn't mean that their brains fall apart when they go in there, but it tells you the mindset of the people who designed it, the environment they work in, and also there are engineers there who undermine. When you get a good commissioner, the engineers run the department. They can I mean, when we had
And we
that,
do have a good commissioner, right? He was involved with the trains and everything like that.
I think he's a nice person, but I thought Rediker was okay too.
Oh, he was terrible. He told us there was no problem with the buses. They spent $1 million in
Well,
4 years
okay,
to conclude that
I
New
didn't
Haven
say
was
agree.
right, that it was broken, when he said it wasn't.
Right. I mean, they concluded, and this is like a really important moment, and I don't want to miss this. Like, we're talking about tolls, we're talking about transportation investment. At the same time, we work to secure that study to prove what we already knew here in our city, which is every time the commissioner would come down or someone would come down and say,
We
the
had
buses
him on
are
video.
wonderful.
Rediker said
Buses
it's
are wonderful. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful bus service. And every time we reached out to them and told them it doesn't go anywhere near where it needs to go. It doesn't connect people to where
Or
they
at the
live,
right
where they work,
times when
at the right
people ride
times.
the bus.
And
We
so
had
we-
the governor saying the same thing.
That's right. And so we snuck in that study a few years ago and forced them to do it. And thank goodness they actually took it seriously and went through the study. And what they concluded is just to bring it up to adequate service, it would require
$15.5 million in capital improvements,
And
and 7.7 in annual operating
That's right.
funds.
And that doesn't even get to where we should be. Like, that's to get it to
So
adequate.
here's what's frustrating me, and this is why it's always not fair that you guys get us dumping on you in New Haven because we're frustrated when you're trying to move a state bureaucracy, but you're the ones we see.
Yeah.
So we wanted you fighting for that. So what you got was they spent 4 years and $1 million for a study that said exactly in detail everything they were told on the first day by officials and citizens in New Haven. The buses are designed for where people worked 50 years ago and what time they ride the bus
That's
to go
right.
to places where they no longer go. Specifics out the wazoo. So 4 years later, after spending money, we have a study. No sense they're going to spend the money on it. No sense they're going to do it. And 4 years are gone. Does that make you want to jump out the window as a legislator? Is there any way to get faster progress than that?
Someday I may write up the whole experience of when I tried to get a fixed route shuttle between Southern and Union Station. And
Well, Southern's the no man's land on the bus thing. We had someone who was a professor
no,
from
they
Seymour.
wanted Southern
3
wanted it.
hours to get to Southern if you're lucky with the connections from 7 miles.
Well, there is a shuttle now, but it comes out of their
oh, you
block
did?
grant.
Okay.
But DOT blocked it because we had a lot
Department
of
of
arguments
Transportation.
about if it's within an hour, that they didn't want to spend the operating money.
So let me ask you, how do you deal with that as politicians, elected officials, where you even get leadership roles, but you represent Spaceship New Haven, which is not numerically the majority of the state? We see this so radically different.
Yeah.
You're dealing with people, whether it's the engineers, the suburban lawmakers, who are not going to spend a cent so that poor people can ride the bus.
I mean, and that's
what do you do? All these years you've done this, Roland, and we still have the exact same system with no hope it's going to change.
Oh, that's where we're wrong. That study was completed a month and a half ago. A month and a half ago is when it's released. And I think we're in a moment right now where we can secure that commitment.
You think we can get 15.5 in capital and 7.7 annual operating?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Is that going to happen this term?
I have no other priority but that.
Oh.
To me, that is the priority. Reforming our bus system in New Haven, at least to get it to adequate, is, I think, given where I've put my focus for the last few years and now as chair of transportation, I've got to be able to evidence. Hartford did something very similar, where they studied their entire route system. The Metro Hartford Alliance went through with surrounding towns and the COG to come up with it. I think we've got to make an example.
Okay, I'm venting now.
That New
because
Haven
they
and
did the
Hartford.
Speedway. They got the busway for Hartford. All that money spent. We asked them to put GPS on buses. They put it first in Hartford, and then for a lot of reasons we documented, it took them years to get a darn GPS on a New Haven bus, and it still didn't work. We're the stepchild on that.
We have to get this done this year. But to me, I can't envision making this sort of investment in transportation without getting the two cities that have pioneered transformative bus investment the right way, Hartford and New Haven, and not putting money into buses in Hartford and New Haven. We have got to do that right. We've got to do bike ped right. We've got to do buses right. We've got to do trains right. I mean, there are systematic changes that we need to make structurally across all transit modes, but there are places that you start. And we've got a study ready to move in New Haven right now. We've put the work in, and it's time for us to make this investment.
Okay,
And it's small scale investment, and I don't want to lose it because it's a small
You're right. It's not a
investment
lot
to
of
move
money
it.
in the picture. Just when I look, Pat, when you look at the time you've been in legislation since 1985, is Roland going to succeed?
Well, of course he is.
But seriously, you talked about the spaceship that is the DOT. You watched this study. You've been involved with people on buses since you were an older woman. in the 80s. You know what this is about.
Yes.
Is
But
there any way that a person realistically, of course we want Roland to believe he succeeds, because if Roland doesn't believe it as the chair of the committee, it's never going to happen, right? But is it going to happen without, he doesn't have to listen?
Well, we have to decide. But whether, listen.
We have decided the governor is based on where he does his actions. Each governor, back since we can remember, acts based on where they think political pressure comes from and
Exactly.
power.
And
And they've
New Haven-
decided bus riders are the lowest priority.
But New Haven has to make it an issue. We do. And we all have to be
mayor
on the
said
same
4
board.
years ago,
And
this
that-
is a civil rights issue. Her department, her transit department brought a bike ride up to Hartford to change the law so they can build a separated bike lane. We've been making it an issue.
I don't know. She didn't discuss it with me, but I'm sure that whatever plan they had was a good one. That you're right. We have to learn how to leverage it. I have a political analysis too. Which is, we put this is now the second governor where the biggest vote came from New Haven.
Right. Then they say, screw you, New Haven, unless it's a few people who are big donors, right? Like they still want the train. Our bus riders, they have just.
I wouldn't say that.
They
I
haven't
wouldn't
done a
do the big donor
single
thing.
announcement or single.
I think we need to be coordinated, and we should
But what
not
about
engage.
bus riders within our city? Why do they have such little political power?
We don't engage sometimes. Sometimes we sabotage ourselves. Or I have spoken with people about a whole list of things where literally, and these are decent, they roll their eyes and they'll talk about the latest demonstration. It's like they see New Haven as a sound stage, for angry people, and.
Or as the DOT person told me when I called on for the 10th time about the 10th way they screwed up rolling out the GPS, he talked about the tinfoil hats. We're the tinfoil hats because we don't just believe in driving cars everywhere. How do we change that?
Look, I mean, and to me, that was one of the important things about the study. I know people hate the idea of studies, and they told us at the beginning, but it wasn't, for the first time, it isn't New Haven or Representative Lemar or Representative Dillon saying we need to do this in New Haven because we say so. This is a state-sponsored study with state DOT officials and consultants who concluded the same thing that we've been saying. It does change the dynamic. And DOT is changing, and the engineers are changing. We're not the same place where when Pat tried to get on the transportation committee 20 years ago.
I was on transportation.
Was originally told, well, girls don't want to be on transportation.
I was on it, though.
Yeah.
I
And
was on Banks, too.
They
Same
said
thing.
girls?
Yes.
The word girls.
Well, there was an issue with the senator, yes.
The
That's-
senator. You don't want to name names.
No, I don't.
Okay.
His son is still around. No one ever leaves that building just because they're not in the.
But sometimes they leave to come to Dateline New Haven, which you're listening to on WNHH, your home for community radio at 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. State Representatives Pat Dillon, Roland Lemar of New Haven, filling us in. Thank you so much for coming in about the upcoming session. So transportation obviously is huge. What about the budget? We just had a mayoral campaign where everyone seemed to agree we got to get more reimbursement for payments in lieu of taxes for the 50, I guess 6% now of our property in town we can't tax. Is that realistic? Is the state going to give us more for pilot, or are there other kind of revenues that we can get in this upcoming short session?
I don't. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Pat.
No, go ahead. It's. I'm trying to think. You're saying pilot and education.
Or any other kind of revenue?
It is going to be tough in this budget.
Yeah.
It's going to be really tough. We just voted on an agreement to settle a lawsuit with the hospitals in December. That whole crusade against the hospitals, the Malloy engaged in some things that we knew that he hated them, but we couldn't have known some of the things that were going on within the executive branch. We were on the hook for $4 billion, but it was settled for $1.8 billion. And it restricts, I had a lot of questions in the hearing, but I obviously wasn't going to be able to change anything. We're locked in that. That's going to crowd out some other issues. The governor doesn't want to raise some taxes. He is very committed to his stuff. Not really clear, because he's held up some things in New Haven.
What has he held up?
Repair of homes in Upper Westville.
Why?
I'm not clear how much he personally was involved, because he was helpful to the people in Eastern Connecticut, and he put things on the.
So basically, what gets to your? So Roland, do you agree that we're
Well,
not going to see any pilot or ECS?
We just had an
increases?
argument, a meeting about it 3 weeks ago, though. It was brutal, not with the governor,
Mhm.
with his people. They didn't want to do it, and so they think it costs too much money, which is insane, and so I think we had gotten it started again, though.
And it's about the sinking homes?
The sinking homes. They pulled the plug on it twice now, and then they revived it because I went crazy. Thank goodness we were in session when I heard about it. And we had a commitment in front of many witnesses that they would revive it, and then they capped the amount of money that homeowners can get. And anyway, it's...
So that issue's back on the table. What about a pilot?
It's going to get done.
What about pilot and...
Yeah, no, I think if Patty Dillon and Roland Lemar are sitting around the table writing a budget, we increase the taxes on millionaires and hedge funds and close the carried interest loophole, probably legalize marijuana and use those funds.
Although that legalization isn't producing the revenues other governments thought they would.
Oh, yeah, no, it would be a small percentage of what we could do. And you would see dramatic investments in places and spaces like New Haven, Hartford, Bridgeport that have carried the social burdens for the entire state for centuries, frankly. But sadly, Patty and I don't get to sit around the table.
So that's the
budget.
question I ask you every time you come on.
Yeah.
There's a basic issue that, according to the last state study, which isn't super recent, the people who earn the most money in the state, the top 1%, pay maybe a third to a half of the percentage of their income in taxes that poor and working class people pay. If you're rich, you're paying half as much percentage-wise your taxes as someone who's poor or working class.
And that was a tax incident study done in 2013, I believe, that predated the tax cuts that Trump put into effect in 2018. So it's probably exacerbated.
Now. But Ned Lemar, who comes from the 1%, has told you he will not even consider raising marginal tax rates on millionaires, meaning that it's not beginning with all your money, but like once you've reached either $500,000 or $1 million, then your taxes go up from 6.99% to 7.5%. Do I have that right?
That's right.
And am I right?
In case I forget that, my district reminds me all the time.
So
I heard it at Christmas parties.
Am I right that, because Josh Elliott told me, he told you guys, I'm not going to punish success, which is what really rich people say about why their inherited money or other money shouldn't be taxed at the same rate as someone who works at a laundry. Do I have that right, that that's the reality up there and it's off the table?
The politics of it is, though, that our caucuses have grown on the Democratic side. We had 2 years where we were tied, and a Republican budget
Does
passed.
your caucus favor dealing with the tax inequality?
We have new legislators from Greenwich and Westport, and so we have to be respectful of that. That's number one. Number two, whether you agree with it or not, or I agree with it or not, there are a lot of people who live in that area who have experienced loss. Now, they have more money than many of the people in my district all put together, but the reality is, their houses are worth less. There are real estate issues there. They're capped on what they can deduct. They feel
all we're saying is, why shouldn't they pay as much of their income in taxes as I do?
I'm not defending.
You're explaining why they feel like they're having a hard time.
I'm explaining.
So when Lemar goes to his yacht club, they're all drinking crying in their beer about this stuff, right?
I don't know about Ned Lemar, and you'll have to ask him yourself. I'm talking about my colleagues and what they will say to me, and they're not wrong. They are listening to the people who sent them there. So the question is, how else do we do it if we don't do that? Because if you start out making, X amount of money, and now you're making X minus Y amount of money, you believe that you're hurting. And also the market isn't doing so well, the market's
doing great. We have the best market in the history of the country.
No, I think that's inflated. And also a lot of people that don't get me started on that.
Okay.
The interest rates are artificially depressed, but probably out of some insiders in politics.
Right, Trump wants to get reelected. So Haji Bey has
he had a lot of
question about
buybacks
this.
because of that 2017 tax bill. We could be headed for a crash.
Haji Bey Chadaboshalu says, what are your thoughts on reviving SB 414 to tax Yale's non-educational properties in buildings that have combinations? If I have this right, Yale has a building that's some educational stuff.
That was my bill.
Right, I remember
20 years
recently.
ago.
What about reviving it?
Because first of all, there was never any inventory of what property was covered by my bill.
We've never known whether, in fact, that would produce any money. No one's ever given me a straight answer from either side.
No,
it seems like they
believe-
almost don't want us to know.
Well, I do. I mean, I wanted to tax the golf course.
Right. But then they agreed to pay us for fire service. That's how that deal was struck.
Right. And then I believe when the alderman, I'm sorry I use the old language, but
It's
I know
okay.
alder is a tree to me. But I can use it. The Daniels deal expired after 20 years, and when they renewed it, I believe the Board of Aldermen waived the right to tax those properties in perpetuity.
Oh, wow.
Now, I don't think you should do anything in perpetuity.
So do you want to revive? Do you want to revive
I could
your
be
old law?
wrong, but you would need both Yale and the City of New Haven to agree to reopen the Yale deal, which I strongly believe they should do, because I don't want this constant complaining. I mean, if it's, it's kind of like someone who's waiting for an inheritance. It's an incentive kicker. You don't want to. You're not
So
going
what
to do
about
anything.
your old bill? Do you want it back?
I can't. It wouldn't work if the
Because of
city
this
waived
deal.
its ability. But what you can do is to have both parties agree to reopen that deal. But what you would have to do is quantify what was given up.
Look, because I really want to know.
We don't know that.
If we passed a bill and taxed those buildings that had any profit-making work going on them in addition to education, I got the sense from some people they really didn't think that was going to produce much money.
It would have been the golf course, as far as I know.
And how much would we get on the golf course?
Well, I don't know that
Okay.
because it's never been taxed.
I think
Roland.
there was more opportunity there. I don't like taxing nonprofits is a difficult conversation to have.
Right, because the church on the corner says if you tax Yale, you're taxing us, and we say we're going after a special provision that the state passed in the 1800s that said 6 colleges and universities, including Yale, get a special tax exemption on buildings that have a combination of educational and.
But this is something we've got to do.
events.
I mean, we have to recognize that Yale's a little bit different than the church on the corner. If you remember a couple years ago when I took over this fight, they'd gotten small nonprofits like the Yale Youth Hockey to yell at me how they won't be able to use Ingalls anymore, and other like the New Haven Symphony Orchestra saying, well, they just told us if we were in support of this, then they wouldn't let us use Woolsey Hall anymore.
As Yale doesn't have the ability to let them continue to use Woolsey Hall.
That's right. And so this, look, that bill 414, any property tax change is a rough instrument to get to what we should be getting at, which is Yale needs to be doing more financially.
What is the more? We had a mayoral election where Justin Elker, who won, said, well, Tony Harp, you got them up to what 12 million, 14 million a year and other kinds of payments. Is that the right number?
Yeah.
And we want 50. And we all laughed and said, you can't come in there and just say, Yale, you're giving us $50 million.
Why not? I don't think we're going to get $50 million. I think that is true. I think it's true that we're not going to get $50 million. But why not? Why not quantify what the tax benefit is that they are receiving and the social benefit that they are receiving by being able to invest broadly in the city of New Haven without any restraints. They have no real financial restraints on any financial investment they wish to make in our city location-wise.
And they get the advantage because they're not taxed. That's something that
That's right.
bugs the real estate people. They built that new building on the parking lot on Elm Street and has dorms, but they didn't. It's sort of, they feel like it's a real estate operation that can then charge the less rents because they're not taxed.
And we shouldn't. And I
But on the other hand,
bristle
people
at
don't
the
like. But
idea
other
of-
people sometimes don't like it when the Yaleys go out and inflate the real estate market off campus by having them rent where they cram the kids into East Rock and charge 3
That's
times
right.
much for the apartment. So they kind of get hit both ways.
I think we need to define what Yale is, though.
What is Yale?
Yale New Haven Hospital is different from Yale University. Yale University and its endowment is separate from the School of Forestry, the School of Medicine, and so forth. So if they end up, what you end up, if we just say Yale and, waive this and people foam, then what we see up there is they closed a clinic in West Haven that the medical school had through CMHC that was seeing indigent people that were placed in the community. And if people were snarling, let Yale pay for it. Well, the medical school wasn't going to do that. And that doesn't do anything about the Yale endowment. And so we have to make sure what part of Yale we're looking at. The
point.
endowment has no duty to any of those to the law school, to the. That's how it's structured. There, so I would really go for the university, and which yes, we can't talk about that when my son comes home because there are certain things people remember. They promised when they closed the Yankee Doodle that they would put up a plaque. They never did. You have generations of Hopkins graduates who you can find people in Brooklyn bad-mouthing Yale over what they did because they can't be trusted.
They could do a picture of someone dying of a heart attack and say, this used to start here when there was a Yankee Doodle.
No, it's about keeping your word.
Yeah.
It's also about childhood,
And it's about what's happening at the state legislature in 2020. We're talking about that with State Representatives Roland Lemar, Pat Dillon on Dateline, New Haven. So, folks,
I want to fight back one quick thing. Whether it's Mayor Elliker during the campaign saying $50 million is the number, or me saying it's Move New Haven, $15 million for investment and $7 million for operations, why not lead with what the ask should be? No one else is embarrassed to do that on any issue. Suburban folks in Connecticut have been fine saying, no, allow us to keep our restrictive zoning in place, allow us to wall our communities off from all of these concerns.
We have a question about that
for something huge.
So what are your thoughts?
We should ask for something huge.
What are your thoughts of getting suburbs? A question. Thank you. On getting suburbs to relax zoning laws and bear some of the burden for affordable housing. That in that same category.
When I don't want to, I don't call affordable housing a burden. I mean, affordable housing
opportunity.
Affordable housing is the opportunity for our state to grow that we have missed for the last 2 generations. Other states are investing in it, and that is the workforce housing. It's where people from age 22 to 35 get their first housing, largely inside of developments that have 20 to 30% set aside for restricted affordable.
The way a young family grew up in Guilford can stay in Guilford.
That's exactly right.
Right,
and it's got to be everywhere. The governor, I was a little disappointed when he went on WNPR earlier this week and showed no willingness to push our suburban towns, which relied on restrictive land covenants and deed covenants, racial restrictively redlining.
That's because that's who he is. People don't realize all you guys, Democratic Party, coalesced the labor movement against someone who's for the 1% who doesn't want them taxed and looks out for the interest of credits. I still don't have my mind around why you did that.
Well, I do want to say that in addition, the housing issue, what seems to be playing out is that there are ring towns that are getting open space and have restricted and want to keep out affordable housing, and because it means something to them that maybe is not always accurate.
People of color.
But so what? Yeah. And the assumption is, New Haven gets density. Well, that's great, but we get density, but we don't get what you need to make density work.
Which is?
We need decent bus service. We don't have. You can't get. We don't have decent parking. You need the amenities. If we're going to take all the density, then we need the tools. If all these other towns are going to refuse to have open housing, but they want land, which frankly is a good in its own, but it also.
And to your point, 360 State was built, the ultimate density, biggest apartment tower in the state, because I would argue that State Street train station was built right across the street.
Right.
That became the way. So before I let you go, 2 quick questions. Justin Elliker, new mayor of New Haven. The delegation already met with him once. I saw you coming out of that meeting at Taller Records a week ago. You got a second one planned. What's your message to him and how he's doing vis-a-vis the state delegation?
Keep it up. I mean, I didn't know him well. We met after he won. It was about 45 minutes. I mean, he was in touch with me all the time, but
Who spoke more, you or he?
Was not involved.
That 45 minutes, like, how many minutes was Pat and how many minutes was Justin?
He was very focused on ideas for getting money.
Mm-hmm. I don't blame him.
And very disciplined about making sure he got his,
So what do you mean keep it up? What should he keep up?
I think that we have fallen into a pattern in the delegation because we were not meeting, of people kind of doing their own thing and not coordinating very well. And the commons was getting lost. It would be, okay, I'm this person. I want this little thing. And there wasn't dialogue about. You
mean with the mayor and the state delegation?
Or between the state delegation members.
So what's changed?
I think that.
Are you meeting more? Like, is there a second meeting planned?
We had one meeting. That's more than we had in 2 years.
Really? You had never had a meeting with all state legislators and the mayor over the last 2 years?
No. I believe I said that when you asked me if I was involved in the mayoral.
Mm-hmm. And then is there a second one planned?
Yes, this week.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Okay.
So, do I think I agree with him? I mean, there isn't a natural fit, but maybe there is. We certainly agree on environmental issues, but I'm very impressed that he immediately reached out to the delegation members and that the conversation is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Do I expect it to be perfect? No. I think we've gotten into some bad habits. We don't think team now. We're fragmented.
Mm-hmm.
But and we're going to have to recognize that we all need each other. But I think it's a really good start.
What about you, Roland?
I mean, unlike Pat, I have known Justin for a long time. And as mayor-elect, he's going to be different than as someone I met in a coffee
shop. He's not mayor-elect. He's the mayor now.
I'm sorry. As mayor, he's now different than he was as mayor-elect, than he was as campaigning. Different than when I started with him on the board of alders.
It is
different
fun
from
watching.
When I've worked with him when he was a young graduate student in my district who was getting involved with Friends of East Rock Park. The role is different, and so I imagine, even though I've known him for a long time, that experience is going to be different working with him. And it was good to have that fresh start a week ago where he's laying out the priorities for the city as he sees them, the challenges that he's walking into and confronting right now, and the opportunities that I think we both have if we work collaboratively together. Like there's a relationship that he's going to have with the governor that is different than the ones that we're going to have with the governor. And sometimes we're going to have the power to move an agenda item, and other times he's going to have Mayor Elicker is going to have. He's
really going to have
the power
with the governor?
I believe so.
Well,
and so I think working together is a good opportunity for us to really advance New Haven interests.
And finally, do you folks have any candidate for the 2020 presidential nomination? Any thoughts on that contest?
I haven't endorsed anyone.
What are you seeing that you like or don't like? Do you think there's any chance in the hell that we could beat Donald Trump in 2020?
There are a number of people I've met personally, and I like them when they're at home, but how they perform on the road is a very important test to me, and the ability to build a coalition that is broad and represents.
Do you think Bloomberg is for real? By spending this much money, is he instantly going to be in the top tier?
I don't know what he's up to. I mean, Tom Steyer drives me crazy.
Well, he's not going to be a factor.
I know,
now.
but there's
He's
so much money.
Bloomberg.
Why doesn't he help us
get
the voters back on the rolls?
Will it be a Linda McMahon phenomenon where the money didn't matter, or will in fact make him he's already 5% without going to a single debate?
Who, Michael Bloomberg?
Yeah.
He's advertising in markets where
Super Bowl. But he's also done
L.A.
But he's also done the meta-analysis where he's doing targeted ads to the swing voters who voted for Trump and are willing to change. They found out what issues, according to the Times, that they're willing to change on. He's actually spending heavily on those, too, as well as the Super Bowl where nobody else has ever done it.
Maybe it'll be salutary. I mean...
But do you see him as the nominee?
I am willing to support the Democratic nominee.
What do you think it's going to be?
I have nothing negative to say about anybody right now.
That's fair. Okay, Roland, do you have anyone you liking?
Yeah, well, I mean, my two favorites, you have to know, a week ago, I would have said my two favorites were Elizabeth Warren and Julian Castro, and now they are teaming up, and so they become even stronger favorites in my mind. I just like Senator Warren's policy command. I like her personality. I think she's comfortable walking into any room of anyone, anywhere in the country, and having a real, honest conversation about issues. Mm-hmm. I admire her greatly, and I will gladly support her up through the primary, and after that, regardless of who wins, I will work off the 30 pounds I've gained in the last few years, making sure
So you're supporting Warren?
I'm supporting Warren at this point, yeah.
And then you're both supporting whoever the nominee is?
Oh, yes.
I contributed very, very early in the cycle. We're talking like $20 to Kamala Harris. I was very impressed with what she did in the Judiciary Committee. She didn't perform that well out there, but I gave to her really because I thought that she would have trouble raising money. I mean, I think some candidates have more trouble than others. You never know. And I still think very highly of her. But I didn't endorse her. I just contributed.
Well, I want to thank you both for coming in. Every time you come in, we get to about a third of the questions I want to ask you. Every time you come in, I learn so much about the issues facing our state and how they affect New Haven. So thank you to state reps Pat Dillon and Roland Lemar for coming on to Dateline New Haven. Thanks everyone for listening, sending questions. And thanks to the miracle man behind the controls, WNHA station manager Harry Droz, who by the week gets us on platforms I never even heard of so people can watch or listen to this program. I already forgot the name of the new one he Snap Summer, not Snapchat, some kind of.
Well, thank you very
Something
much
catchy.
for providing tea.
Oh, you're welcome. You're always welcome to come have more tea. That's our lure, so we get you to come back. And we're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and night here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.